Unlike chickens, ducks are muddy, messy pooping machines that require constant bedding changes. I was really sick of cleaning out the messy run and the constant straw everywhere. I was determined to find a solution, so when we moved last year, I tried something that completely changed the way I managed my ducks, saving time, energy, and money. Hey, this is Willow at Two Toe Farm, and here I'm going to walk you through how I made a self-cleaning run using gravity and a little bit of infrastructure. Ducks poop constantly, and not the nice dry chicken poo, wet, sloppy, stinky poop that soaks through all of their bedding. Now, this bedding can be broken down into compost for the garden, but the production of 3 ducks was beyond what I needed for my gardens, and I was sick of going through bale after bale, for the cost being anywhere from $6 to $12 a bale. Other options for flooring include wood shavings, wood chips, sand, or even AstroTurf, but none of those seemed really any better for my setup. Ducks need a natural material to walk on, and since they have soft webbed feet, you need to avoid any rough surfaces. If a duck gets any puncture on their feet, they can get an infection leading to bumblefoot, and yes, that's a real term. This requires immediate care, and my duck Pomelo got an infection that ended up requiring surgery and a toe amputation. This was an expensive and intrusive procedure that required a lot of care and recovery inside. He most likely got it from stepping on a raspberry cane, and since he already walked pretty funny, we didn't notice it right away. Now we check our ducks' feet every week for any injuries, and we use an Epsom salt soak if there's any sort of abrasion. When we moved here last year, I designed a run using sloped ground and a trench covered in landscaping plastic. I raked and scraped the ground and used a level to make sure that the slope would allow for all the water to flow down into one area. I then covered this with a layer of small landscaping rocks that were near our driveway, and I made sure they were smooth enough to walk on. It's important that the surface doesn't get too hot or too cold for their feet, so don't use something dark that will get too hot in the summer. The rocks allowed me to simply hose down the run, and the poop washed away. I went even further by digging a hole big enough for a 5-gallon bucket to sit for the water to collect in, and I would use that to fertilize or water my perennials. Make sure to subscribe for when I make a video on how to effectively and safely use duck waste for plants. This design worked pretty well, but as time went on, the ground settled a little and dips formed where water wouldn't wash things away. The small landscape rocks were also too small and blocked some of the waste from washing out when combined with leaves and straw. I also decided to move the run back to a new location, so it was the perfect time to improve this setup. I had my husband help me move the run forward so I could scrape up the rocks. We decided to improve our water capture system as well and dug a drainage line along the retaining wall that would turn 90 degrees and go right down the middle of the new run. We're having some work done later this year that will be directing the water from our gutters to this area, so it just made sense to capture this gray water and use it for our landscape. While this was being set up, I leveled the area from the new run, making sure to compress the soil as I went. I dug the same style of trench and covered it all with plastic before putting a drainage tube down. After situating the coop on top, we added 10 bags of large river rocks. This was not nearly enough, and we ended up getting 15 more. I repositioned the coop to the far end and had my husband shorten the legs so that I could actually reach and clean it this time. There's also waterproof canvas over the top, which we pulled down slightly on one end to keep the water from flowing into the coop. That way the rain can pass through the other end and wash through the rocks. I chose not to create a water collection area this time, as the water is going to flow right into our perennial raspberry bed and down right into more perennial plants. I might add this at some point though. The expense for the project included 2 25-foot drainage tubes at about $30 each, and the river rocks at $10 a bag. In the end, we spent just over $300 on this phase of the project. The run I got 2 years ago for about $200, and this is really just half of it. The coop was about $100 in wood and supplies, but we built that last summer. In the end, it all adds up, but this is just the reality of having ducks as pets, and I can't even justify it with getting eggs since my girls have been on egg strike for over 6 months. When deciding the layout for your run, make sure that you're considering things like having access to electricity and water. You also want to make sure that the water flowing out has a place to go and isn't going to form a stagnant pool that attracts mosquitoes or other bugs. Ducks love mud and they will seek this out. And while it's tempting to plant beautiful things near their run to kind of spruce it up, the ducks will definitely get into this and demolish whatever you try to grow. I'm just going to use bricks and then coat everything with mulch. As for what I'm going to use inside the coop, I will continue to use the straw that I have left, and then I'm going to switch to wood shavings. This is mostly for aesthetics and because they don't make as much of a mess, but they also break down easier in my garden beds and are less likely to form a big mat that water gets stuck in. Since moving everything around, the ducks have adjusted quite well. In fact, they really loved that I dumped a bunch of mulch down for them to mess around with. One more trick that I found keeps the run a little bit more tidy is to also use old outdoor furniture cushions. My ducks love sitting on these, and I can just wash them off every day. And stay tuned for my next video where we completely redo their pond. Thanks for joining me, and make sure to follow for more tips on raising ducks, urban gardening, and frugal living. I'd also love to hear other ways that people have set up their runs or problem-solved duck raising issues.